I want to ask, because you're a mom that empowers moms, and now you've wrote this children's book. How do we do a better job of teaching generosity to our kids?
Oh, I think, well, first of all, we have to live it out. Okay. And I'm trying to teach my kids that we can be generous in a lot of different ways. Like when my 14, so I have 3 children, they are 15, 14, and 9. And, when they do something nice for one another, I'm like, thank you for being generous with your words. You know, thank you for being generous with your time. Thank you for being generous with your spirit. When they do something nice, like my little guy, it warmed my heart. He gave his money away to a kid that didn't have a lot at a book fair. Now, I'm not saying my kid's perfect. I mean, he also, I don't know if you want to edit this out, he drew a penis on somebody's sympathy card. So he's still a boy, okay? My kids are still very flawed, like all children. And,
Yes,
but
all children.
But I think learning to, and the new book that I wrote, Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? I have a guide for parents on how to, like, they're asking them the right question. It starts with asking them the right question, like, what kind of person do you want to be? And also praising the right things. Not just praising their sports accomplishments and their academic achievements. Learn to praise the character. Learn to praise the personality, the unique gifts that they have been given, the talent. I love how you used your creativity in that situation. I loved how you stood up for somebody. Praise that stuff more than you praise anything else, because it's at the end of the day, it's also, we can say that we want our kids to grow up to be, children of high character that are kind and respect people. But what are we praising the most? So it really does start with us.
Well said. I think if we flip on any news network, and you can see some real issues in our country, as someone who was on the front lines of the news cycle, what do you think is happening? Back to the devaluing of families, I want you to speak to that and the importance of the community of believers.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that so many of the issues we face in our society are in direct result to how we value families in this country, which I don't think we do a good job of, and also how we treat mothers, particularly motherhood, not just mothers in the workplace, but like scrutinizing mothers and penalizing them once you become a mother. When I was trying to figure out what was next, after losing my job, and I had a heart already for mothers. And I started realizing that motherhood is marginalized in this country. Not just working moms. I'm saying motherhood in general. But like once you become a mom, you're treated like you're a risk and a liability. You're counting Cheerios in the corner. I'm sure your wife gets that. She's not viable to lead anymore. When in fact, like motherhood's equipped us with so many more capabilities that we had before we were mothers. And yet we're penalized for having children. We are scrutinized for having children. There's something called the motherhood penalty, where we're passed over on promotions and we're paid 70 cents on the dollar. Whereas fathers enjoy something called the fatherhood bonus. All of a sudden, they're a better leader because they're a dad, and they're the providers that, of course, they have to earn, and they're hired more often than men without children, which is fascinating. But I just think we need to start rewarding what matters most. If we don't have kids in this country, we don't have a labor force. You just look at it from an economic and financial standpoint, even if you don't have children. If we don't have kids, we don't have a labor force. If we don't have a robust labor force to work, we cannot grow our economy. So I think just a lot of the economic issues we deal with are in result to the lack of value for families, the lack of support for families from a policy level, from an attitude level, from a societal level.
Yeah, I mean, these have severe implications. I think if we don't prioritize motherhood, I mean, that's how, again, population grows. And again, that has huge economic impacts when we're seeing population go down and stagnate. And we then see that the average birth rate for a family is maybe 1 or 2 children. These do have big economic impacts.
They really do. And that's why I don't think and that's why so much of the book that I wrote that's called You Don't Have to Carry It All, Ditch the Mom Guilt and Find a Better Way Forward. It wasn't so much about like, okay, here's the policies to help support families and mothers in the workplace. It was establishing a case for why it's even important. And a lot of people don't think that it's their problem. And no, you may not have children, but we should all have a collective responsibility in children because they are our future. They're our greatest natural resource, right? So, but yet so many of the policies here, I mean, I talk to sociologists and historians, and it's fascinating to hear how this country was not set up for parents. It was set up for single people, which, yeah, look, my brother's single. Like, I'm not knocking single people, but we also need to have kids if we want to continue to have a human race and a labor force and an economy. So it's really just about what we're valuing, what we're placing an emphasis, what we're prioritizing. And it is important for all of us to value families and children because we're not going to have an economy and we're not going to have a future without them. So let's not make it more difficult. Let's celebrate motherhood instead of penalize it and scrutinize it. And let's really support families. We say we're a family-friendly country in this, right? And I look at the policies, we're like the greatest nation to not have paid paternity leave and paid maternity leave. You know, I'm not saying it's always the government's fault, but it's just ridiculous that we don't support families like we should. And we get
No, I think you're spot on.
And I think dads.
I love that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think dads have more to say about gender equality than anyone else. We need men in the conversation. I have a little chapter in my new book dedicated to inviting men into the conversation, because here's what happens, Andrew. I think men can either take their paternity leave, and if they don't have it, fight for it, because what it does is out of the gate, it changes the dynamic. It not only says, it's healthy for the relationship, for the mother and father. It's healthy for the bonding. You will have a lifelong bond because of the time you have spent. But more importantly, it levels the playing field out of the gate. And it says, raising the child isn't just on the mother. It's a team sport. Parenting is a team sport. That's when families are at their best, when the parents are parenting together and raising the child together, instead of just saying out of the gate, oh, Mom, you got to figure everything out. And if you're working, you got to figure that out too. So men, take your paternity leave. If you don't have it, fight for it.